So welcome to the Enactus United States Kickoff Week. This is our leadership panel. And before we get started, there's one thing I'd love for you guys to do, if you could, and that's just in the chat box. If you could put three things. Number one, put your name so we know who you are. And number two, put your school so we know where you're from. But number three, and kind of the gist of the panel is if you could put in some of the qualities that you admire most in leaders that you know, whether that's your faculty advisor or people that you see as leader, or maybe it's a leader on your team in particular. But what are those qualities that you admire most and that you think are critical as you think about leadership? So we'll give everyone a sec just to kind of type a few things in. Again, name, school, and those leadership qualities that matter most. And so while you're doing that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Steve Kappler. I'm the interim president of Enactus US, and very, very happy to have you here this afternoon. As I said, we're going to focus on leadership. And one of the things that we like to do from a leadership perspective is think about this, that there's guiding principles that guide your organization. They are your vision, your mission, and your values. And I put up Enactus's mission, vision, and values. And it's critical from a leadership perspective because as you think about leadership, your goal here is to really make sure that these are embodied by your organization. And with that takes leadership. So what are the qualities that leaders need to be able to implement this type of scenario within their organization and really realize their mission and vision and share their core values and make sure those, again, are embedded in the work that's done. So we start thinking about leadership qualities at that point. So I did little research, and we do a lot of research here around leadership qualities. I grabbed a study from Quantum Workplace that looked at the top 5 leadership qualities that people admire most. Number 1 was vision. Number 2, communication. Number 3, empathy. Number 4, accountability. Number 5, gratitude. And this sort of rounds out that individual. Do you have a vision? Can you kind of strategically and critically think about where the organization needs to go? Can you communicate that vision effectively so that people buy into it and really begin to go forward and make that a reality? The empathy one is one that I feel is a critically important part of leadership. It's the people I admire most that were leaders of mine really had what I used to call the empathetic gene. They just understand and can really really feel, you really feel their compassion come out when that empathy gene is turned on. The next is accountability. Do they hold themselves and do they hold you accountable for the things that you're doing? And the last is gratitude. Now, the beauty of those 5, the way that I view them and the way that our research views them is, as we think about Enactus students, as we think about you and the work that you're doing and the next gen leaders that you're going to become, here are the things that we see in them. Number 1 is that critical thinking and problem solving, and that aligns in my mind with vision. Can you take a problem? Can you identify and critically think to solve it? And now, number 2, can you communicate that and get people to understand what it is you see as a problem, how you've identified and critically thought through the ability to solve that problem, and can we get it implemented? Next is empathy. We talked about that, and it's one thing I truly believe our students have as well. And accountability. I love this about the Enactus students. They hold themselves accountable. They hold each other accountable, and I think that's, again, another critical skill that's going to serve you well as you move forward in your careers. And the last, of course, is gratitude. So as we think about leadership, I'm going to introduce our next leader for this panel. And she is the brand new president and CEO of Enactus Global, and she is joining us from Durham, North Carolina. Robyn, welcome.
Thanks so much, Steve. I am thrilled to be here. So excited to be joining you all for another part of the Enactus USA Kickoff Week. You see I'm active in the chat. I'm a big chatter, so feel free to use it if you want to communicate. I know not everyone wants to come off mute and communicate, so I'm paying a lot of attention to the chat. But as Steve did say, I am the brand new president and CEO for Enactus. I think I'm on day 10 or 11 officially in my role. And prior to stepping into this role, I've had a career for over 20 years in nonprofit management and leadership, both here in the United States and globally. Most recently, before coming to Enactus, I helped to lead the Center for the Advancement of Social Entrepreneurship at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. And in that role, I trained enterprise leaders from around the world and impact investors about how to use business skills to solve big social and environmental problems. And I also taught Masters of Business Administration students. Before that role at Duke University, I led Teach for America's work in North Carolina as an affiliate executive director and was responsible for scaling our impact across the state and working primarily in rural school districts to ensure that all students had access to an equitable and high quality education. And then before Teach for America, I'd worked in a range of different impact areas, from philanthropy to community and economic development to global health. Really, the through line throughout my career has really been about how do we create equity of opportunity for all people, regardless of their background or where they're born. So I'm excited to bring a lot of that spirit and that experience to my role in Enactus, in really helping to support our incredible global network of country offices like Enactus USA, who are working every day with students like you. So I'll be sharing a lot more about my background and hoping to answer a lot of your questions during our time together. But I could not be more excited to be with you all and excited to really cheer you on as you take on the school year ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
Yep.
Great. So I wanted to share a few additional thoughts as we get started. A few additional thoughts of kind of some of the vision that I'm bringing to Enactus. Again, on day 10, I still have a lot to learn, but these are some of the initial thoughts that I have. And one that's really grounding me is this quote from Margaret Mead, who is a renowned American anthropologist. And her quote was said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And this quote has certainly been true throughout my career, and I believe it's true now more than ever, that truly this is about people. This is about people like you who get curious, who get inspired, or who get angry about something and are willing to pull other people together to say, we've got to do something. And so that is a huge part of what I think leadership is really all about. And frankly, and you can go ahead to the next slide, if there were ever a time for a small group of thoughtful, committed people to change the world, that time is right now. And that's right now because, as you all know better than anyone, we are living in this time of converging pandemics. We are about 18 months into the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected every single one of our lives in ways we never could have imagined. And globally, it's led to the first rise in extreme poverty in a generation. So we had been globally making a tremendous progress in decreasing extreme poverty. So folks who live on less than $1 a day for years. And now we are seeing that uptick for the first time. We also know that the climate crisis is persistent. It is everywhere and it is growing, largely unabated, despite the fact that there is resounding evidence around what we need to do. As we see what's happening in Afghanistan, we know that the proportion of the global population who are refugees from Afghanistan, but also from so many countries that are in social and economic turmoil, has more than doubled since 2010. So there's massive migration and disruption at the personal and community level. And then billions of people, both here, frankly, in the United States and around the world, still lack access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, some of those basic human rights and assets that we all need in order to live a productive life. And so this is the state of the world. This is the state of the world that we are getting up and facing every single day. And frankly, it would be easy. It would be really easy to despair and to just, go back under your covers and say, forget it. I'm just going to focus on what's right in front of me. And there's nothing that I can do. But while it would be easy to despair, and certainly there have been times when I do, I actually have incredibly great hope in this particular moment as I take on this role of Enactus president and CEO. And I have great hope because of the work that Enactus is doing all around the world. Number one, we are a thriving global network, and we're working to become even more locally rooted and globally informed. So locally rooted means that we are deeply connected to local communities through teams like yours who know what's happening in their own community, and can really innovate from that place of proximity, and also globally informed. So hopefully we are a network that is sharing lessons learned across teams, across states, across schools, and across nations, so that we can work together to leverage that network capacity and really accelerate the pace of change. The second reason that Enactus is giving me such great hope is because we are an experiential learning platform that serves as the world's leading preparer of next generation leaders like you, and hopefully is working to cultivate the needed mindsets, skills, and innovations that are required to really change some of those stats you saw on the previous slide. A lot of those mindsets and skills relate to the skills of high quality leadership that Steve mentioned in the previous slide. And so because we are this experiential education platform, we can serve as a talent pipeline for achieving the sustainable development goals in extremely diverse contexts. And so it is that work, that thriving network of strong independent organizations working all around the world, working in more than 35 countries, that are innovating in diverse contexts, combined with a global organization that I lead that's helping to share solutions across boundaries, that really leads us to that global network, or that thriving global network that is preparing leaders like you to make a real difference, to make an impact, to turn around those statistics, and to create the world that you want for yourselves and that we all desperately need.
All right. Well, thanks, Robyn. Always great to hear that and have a vision articulated, and a direction articulated in creating that hope. Again, the communication aspect of leadership definitely comes through, and when people talk and you can see them get jazzed up about the things you're saying and the direction the organization's heading. And so we're going to have a little bit of a discussion here. I challenge some of the students that are on, especially my Iowa partner. I see someone was from Briarcliff. I'm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, so Iowa must represent with some good questions coming up. But we do have some questions that we asked prior to this session. We asked some students to submit some questions that they had about leadership. And so I'm going to read a few of those, but be thinking of and be willing to, or be put in the chat any questions that you might have. So number one that we had was, what are the qualities that you see as most important in a leader, Robyn?
Well, a lot of those qualities the students put into the chat when they were talking about the qualities that they see as important. But here's a few that kind of come to mind when I really think about, like, what is leadership? What are the things that matter most? And so a couple of thoughts. Number one, if you're a student of leadership, if you're just someone who's observing leaders around you, you will know, and probably already do throughout because of your life experience, that there are many different schools of thought around, like, what is leadership? And those schools of thought have all different definitions. One school of thought and kind of design or framework for leadership that I really believe in is called conscious leadership. And conscious leadership defines leadership as taking responsibility for your impact in the world. So simple, like, you are taking responsibility for the impact that you make in the world, however you define that, whether that's in your family, in your neighborhood, in your community, in your state, in your school, at the global level. And so that notion of really taking responsibility undergirds a lot of the qualities that I think are most important as a leader. Number one, I think that an effective leader, needs to be tremendously self-aware and reflective. You need to know how you're coming across to other people, and you have to be willing to learn and grow and take feedback, and reflective on the extent to which what you are intending is actually coming across in your leadership. What you are intending is actually the impact that you're having on the world. So self-aware and reflective. I think in order to do that, in order to really capitalize on that self-awareness and reflection, great leaders need to be lifelong learners. So they have to constantly be seeking to improve, be willing to learn new things, be humble in the face of what they know and don't know. I also think that leaders have to have in the highest level of integrity. And when I talk about integrity, I think of integrity as delivering on your promises, as doing what you say you're going to do, so that everyone around you can actually trust you. And that means doing what you're saying you're going to do when you make a promise to yourself, when you make a promise to your family members, when you make a promise to your roommate. Like, you got to show up and do it. Because if you're not willing to show up and do it on the little promises, how can you be willing to show up and do it on the big, big things that as a leader really have impact beyond kind of one-on-one relationships? So for me, integrity is fundamental. And then the final thing I'll say, I could go on and on about the qualities that I think are most important in a leader, but the final thing I'll say is that I think that it is critical that all leaders bring an equity lens to their work. What I mean by equity is we know that the problems of the world are not equally distributed, and that there are some of us, because of our identities, our backgrounds, our nationalities, our race, our gender, our sexual orientation, our gender identity, experience things very differently. And so I think every leader has to ask constantly and be reflected on, to what extent are my actions cementing or dismantling inequity? Particularly if part of my role and part of my reason for being in the world is to create a more equitable and just society, which we know all of you really care about. So to what extent are your actions actually cementing or dismantling inequity is a critical question that all leaders need to be asking themselves on a regular basis.
Excellent, excellent. Next question, and this one's an interesting one. It's so interesting. I'm going to take part of it because it really is one that hits home for me. And then I'll kick it over to you. And it's, can you define your leadership style and where it came from? And I'd like to define the important part for me, and that's where it came from. And this is just a lesson learned along the way. I really have formed my style based off two people that were leaders to me as I was early in my career. One was an incredible, empathetic, just a visionary and communicator, everything we've talked about. And I admired him so much. The other was the worst leader I'd ever had. And I learned as much from the bad leadership as I did from the good leadership in terms of the types of qualities that I need and the types of quality in my leader, but more importantly, the things I wanted to emulate and the things I wanted to be. So it came from two very influential people for me. And again, the ability to see both the good and bad in all helps to form your style as you become and move into leadership roles. So Robyn, I'd be interested to hear yours.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it is the people and experiences that have really shaped a lot of my leadership style. So if I were to kind of put a definition to my leadership style, I would say that for me, impact is at the center. Impact is at the center of everything I do. I'm constantly asking, is what I'm doing making the kind of difference that I actually intend? I feel very called to, I've created a career around making the world a better place. And I want to know that it's actually getting better as a result of what I'm doing and who I'm working with and what I'm contributing. And why I'm getting up every day. So I am constantly asking and evaluating, is this having an impact? Adriana, I see you just asked a question around how do you trace your impact? And there's a lot of ways. Certainly there's both quantitative and qualitative ways. In every organization I've worked for, I have worked to really strengthen the quantitative and to be really clear on what are our measurable goals and how do we know if we're going to achieve them? I also studied in graduate school a lot around program evaluation and impact measurement. And so luckily, there's a whole field of scholarship that can help us as leaders do that. I also think the qualitative is really important. I deeply believe in 360-degree feedback and in asking folks how am I coming across? Is this to chest, is what I'm intending actually getting out there in the world? So I think that asking people who are closest to us for candor and for feedback along the way can be an important part of tracing that impact. And my leadership style, like Steve's, comes from people and experiences that have mattered a lot to me. My parents have been incredibly influential in my life. They're both still alive. I'm very close to them. I just texted them right before I got on this call. They live about 40 minutes away from me, so they're a huge part of my life still. They both were first-generation college students who both grew up extremely poor and have been just hardworking people throughout my entire life. And so from them, I have really learned the value of integrity, the value of hard work, and have really gotten that sense of responsibility, that we each have responsibility for our lives and for our community. And so that really guides a lot of my leadership style. Certainly, I think that my faith and my spiritual beliefs guide a lot of my leadership style, and particularly notions of the role that compassion plays in leadership, and really and empathy as well. So trying to really experience and be proximate to what other people are experiencing guides a lot of my leadership. And then, my leadership at this point in my career is really coming from past experiences professionally, and having seen both tremendous success and achieving things that I never thought were possible because of a remarkable group of people, and making big mistakes along the way, and realizing that things didn't turn out the way I wanted them to, or that we were not as successful as we hoped to be. And so I think my leadership style also really comes from learning along the way.
Yeah, there's had a leader who used to say there's nothing wrong with failure. It's your ability to learn from that mistake or that failure, and change the way that you do things, or the approach that you take to make it better. And so those are all experiences. Everything is a learning experience if you could take it from there. To be sure. So students, I'm going to toss out there again. Feel free to throw some questions. I do have a few more that I'll ask, but would love to hear from you. Throw it into the chat and we will ask away. Robyn, you talked not only in this section, but in your first section about change. How do we affect change? How do we have the impact you're talking about? What type of leadership style in today's day and age, with the challenges you outlined earlier, what type of leadership style do you think really is going to help get us through that and into that meaningful change?
Yeah. In thinking about this question, I was thinking about, again, some of the, particularly some impact leaders that I really admire. So I'm going to actually paste a few resources in the chat that might inspire some of our students as well. But I thought about a couple, again, of qualities that really impact-driven leaders need to have. And I think if there's one that I would prioritize over so much, it is that impact leaders need to be proximate, that they need to be close to what they are working on. They need to either have lived experience, they need to be with people who've had lived experience, they need to have deep connection to what they are working on, because not only does that give you the best information about what solutions might work, it also deepens your resilience and your ability to keep going, because impact is hard, change is hard. The problems that we are all collectively working to solve are extraordinarily enormous and difficult. If they were easy, they would already be solved by now. So they are hard, and they require you to keep going over a long period of time. So I think that proximity, one, gives you the best solutions, builds your resilience, and really cultivates ongoing compassion. And one of the leaders that I deeply admire that talks a lot about proximity is Bryan Stevenson, who is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, which specifically works on innocence and wrongful incarceration, specifically with people who have been sentenced with the death penalty. And so I just put in the chat a YouTube video from a plenary talk that Bryan gave a couple of years ago that I go back to every time I need to be inspired, where he talks about the power of proximity. And so I encourage you to watch that at some point today. Another type of leadership that I think is just so important is that I think is really founded on the principles of what are called conscious social change. And this notion of conscious social change really comes from a leader I deeply admire named Gretchen Steidl, who was the founder of a social enterprise called Global Grassroots, which works with women in East Africa to start and to launch water ventures that enable their communities to have access to clean, safe drinking water, and encourages them to make an income. And so her work really focuses on that we have to pay attention to both what's happening in our inner lives for us as leaders, as in addition to what's happening in the outside world. And so I put in the chat a resource from her around the principles of conscious social change. And it really talks about, again, making sure that we as leaders are clear on why we're doing what we're doing and that we're taking care of ourselves in addition to taking care of other people. Other principles that I think are really important for impact leaders. One, like Steve said, you have to be visionary. You can't just be focused on the narrow problem you're trying to solve. You have to be able to communicate the different world that you're trying to create. What's going to be better? What's going to be different? What's going to be more positive as a result of the work, as opposed to you're just trying to decrease or change something that is negative. So you've got to have that positive vision and rally others behind it. You have to be driven by impact, got to be ruthless about the ultimate outcomes you're trying to achieve, willing to ask hard questions about what's working and why, able to consume data, and able to pivot and make changes when things are not working, even when you have invested a lot in prior attempts at change. And then the final thing I would say about what's so important for impact leaders is that you have to be interdependent. Social change doesn't happen because of one hero. It never does. And so I really believe that there is no hero-preneurship in social entrepreneurship. This is not just about one extraordinary person. This is about a team of people that is willing to work together, that understands that all social and environmental challenges exist in a diverse ecosystem with a lot of different players, and is willing to get in the muck to try to figure things out rather than go it alone. So those are some of the things that I think are really important for leaders that are trying to enact real and meaningful change.
That is great. And Robyn, we actually had a question from Marco, and it centers around trust, which is interesting. I think, trust is such an important part. To me, it's that, are you an authentic leader? Do people really trust and believe not only the things you're saying, but the things you're doing? And that's essentially the question. How do you build trust in a leader to stay involved, but also trust that people are doing the right things?
Yeah. I think those are two separate questions. So one, I would say just kind of building the foundational trust is really about authenticity. For me, I believe it's about authenticity. I think it is about being willing to be vulnerable so that people can see who you are as a real human being. And to the point that others have made in the chat, really communicating and being willing to communicate, over communicate around what you're seeing, what you're doing, what you're hearing, what your expectations are. I think that helps a lot of along the way in trust. And then you have to deliver. If you say you're going to do something, you got to do it. And it's incredibly important, especially early on in a new leadership situation. I'm thinking a lot about this in my first few days of a new job, that you have to be, you got to do what you say you're going to do. Because if you don't, people are not going to trust you, and rebuilding that trust is going to be exponentially harder. I think trusting people to do the right job relates more to a management philosophy. Like, how do you actually manage towards a collective goal? And there's a framework that I've shared with Steve before that I really believe in when it comes to management, which is tight, loose, tight. So I think a lot about when I work with people, I'm trying to be really tight up front on what are we trying to achieve, who's going to do what, and what are we driving after? Like, there has to be total alignment around that. Then I believe in being loose in the how, like how you get it done. Like, as long as the thing we defined in the first tight portion gets done, the how, I'm like, be creative, be innovative, use your own expertise around the how. But then we're going to follow up with tight around how are we going to hold each other accountable? How am I, as the leader, going to know that you did what you said you're going to do? By when? Like, what are the metrics we're going to be looking at? So I think that tight, loose, tight piece is really important. And also being transparent with people up front that is the approach you're going to take helps to build trust. I hope that answers your question, Marco. There's a lot of ways to do it. And I certainly have made tons of mistakes along the way when it comes to trust building.
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought something up, and I'll share a story. I mentioned early on that my style was derived from a really good leader and a really poor leader, and this poor leader's one of the big issues was communication. He really was a pretty decent leader, but he couldn't effectively communicate things. And he sat down. I'm probably been reporting to him for about 6 months, And he said, we got talking about a problem and an issue. And he said, Steve, that's yours to solve. I'm going to give you an up rope. You're either going to pull yourself up or you're going to hang yourself. And I understood what he was saying. That probably wasn't the most effective way to communicate what he was doing. And so you're going to have things like that. And that kind of leads into the next question.
Sure.
And that is, and I'm going to answer the first part because it's one of my favorite questions again. If you could travel back in time to yourself as a college student, what advice would you give yourself about both leadership and learning? And mine is real simple. And that you need to take time to understand and experience things, and realize that almost every moment you have is a teachable moment. And we get so wrapped up early in our careers, especially right out of college, and even in college, of I got to get this done, I got to do this, and putting that next thing out in front, you get in such a big hurry, and I just not necessarily tap the brakes, but slow down and realize your environment and the moment that you're in. And that's what I would tell myself, because it took me a good 5 to 10 years to figure that part out.
Good advice. Good advice. I have a few pieces. I think that one is incredibly important. I would add that to my list. I think the advice I would give myself is I would double down on the best advice I ever got when I was in college, which was in my senior year. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels. I was trying to figure out, what do I want to do with my life? I was in English and women's studies, double major. I had been very involved in social impact work on campus, and knew that was my path, and was likely going to do something in the nonprofit sector, but just wasn't sure how to move forward. And one of my closest professors, who's still a mentor and friend and colleague today, said, Robyn, there's never just one path. There's never just one path. And that phrase has been so helpful to me in making lots of decisions along the way. And that most likely your career in life is going to have lots of different branches, and it's going to wind along the way. And so being really clear on what your core values are is critical as you evaluate different opportunities. But very few of us these days, stay in one place professionally or personally forever. And so it's important to know that, yes, what you decide to do immediately after college is important, and to balance that with, most likely you're only going to be there 1 to 3 years, and you're going to have a long career and life ahead of you. A few other pieces of advice that I wanted to offer you all. One, I think that one of the things that I have learned probably in the last 10 years of my career, even more so than I did early on, and I wish I had known this early on, was that very little in life is black or white, and that so much is gray, and it's nuanced, and it's about identifying and mitigating trade-offs. There are only, very little in terms of when you have hard leadership decisions to make are going to be like yes or no, black or white, right or wrong. And you have to be willing to live in that gray and figure out how to move forward. And then the other things I would say in terms of advice are follow your curiosity. If you don't know what you're passionate about yet, you don't know what you want to do, get curious and follow that curiosity. What lights you up on the inside? Go figure that out. Build your skills and experiences along the way so that you have a rich toolbox to draw from in any particular situation. I would also say cultivate a rich, multifaceted and meaningful life. And that might include work. Hopefully work is a part of that, but only one part of that. And so you need to have that rich, meaningful life, both in and outside of what you get paid for. And then the final piece of advice I would say is that I do believe you can be and do anything. I also think you might not be able to do it all at the same time. And so there have been different parts of my career where I have leaned more heavily into a particular role or area of passion and then leaned out. And so knowing that over the course of my lifetime, I'm going to have this rich, full resume and life experiences, but I can't necessarily do it all at once. So those are some of the pieces of advice that I wish I had known earlier on.
Yeah, great answers. And certainly, especially as we think about passion, that would certainly be something I would go back from an advice standpoint and give myself that. It's interesting in my career. anytime I did an interest inventory or one of those surveys of what you should be when I was in grade school up into high school and even early in college was you should be a teacher, you should be in education. When I got out of college, I didn't get into that. I stayed in business, and I struggled. I my first 2 years of my career were rough, and I stumbled into a business degree or a opportunity to utilize my business degree in the education field. And the minute I got back into education and realized how important it was, I'd originally gone to college to be a teacher and a coach, and it just my career took off, and because that's where my passions were, and I should have listened to myself. But eventually, as Robyn said, you kind of find your way back to where you're grounded in those passions. So look early on to try to identify where those things that just drive you, that make it, I got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, catch this plane, and I don't care because I get to go do this. And so find those things that you can really be passionate about, because you will be, as you find those and use those, you will become a lifelong learner, because your goal will be to learn as much about that specific thing as you possibly can. And so it's an interesting way. I know even as a leader, when we're going through interview process, it's something I look for. If they start talking about something and their eyes light up a little bit, they might move up in their seat, their body language says everything about passion. That's what I look for, because I can teach you all the other things. I can't teach you passion. You can't fake that. You either have that or you don't. And so those are the things that I think a lot of people look for. It's qualities I look for, and it's a quality I look for in leadership too, and following someone that. The good leader I talked about, I would walk through a wall for him to this day. We stay in touch. I talk to him every couple of weeks. If I have problems, he's the first person I think about and call. And so there's, and why? Because I thought I was passionate about education until I started working for him. And he certainly embodied what that was. So there's one last question, and I hope there's other questions besides Marco's that you can put in there. We'll have time for this question and possibly one more after that. So this one is, what is the one thing our students and faculty need to know about you and leadership?
Sure. It's so hard to think of one thing. I'm like, the thing that came to mind is that the thing that I think you should know about me is that my role as a mom, I'm a mom to 2 kids and a wife. I've been married for 16 years to a very powerful, a wonderful nonprofit leader himself. So my role as a mom and a wife make me a better leader. I am more organized. I am more efficient. I am more passionate because I see the impact of my work on my family every single day. And there is a phrase, there is an idiom that says, if you want something done, ask a busy person. And frankly, there is no one busier in the world than working mamas. And so I think I have become a better, more effective, more empathetic and passionate leader since becoming a parent. I have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old. And it is those multiple identities that I have that make me stronger at what I do. So something you should know.
Yeah, interesting. The other one that parenting does is it makes you realize how important time management skills are.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it sure does. It sure does. But it's a forcing mechanism, in terms of I pick up my son every day from school. So that is like, I got to sign off at a certain time every day in order to go get him. And that means I need to backwards plan from there in order to be really effective and still meet my other responsibilities. So that's something that you should know about me.
Excellent. Well, are there any other questions? We're going to move on with the next part of the program, but please feel free to continue to put questions in the chat. We're going to have some more time towards the end to be able to answer those as well. But we're going to take a few minutes and tell you a little bit more about Enactus US, some of the things you probably don't normally hear, and do the same thing for Enactus Global, about 5 to 7 minutes for each. Again, if there are any other questions about leadership or style or anything, please put them in the chat and we'll address those. So let's talk a little bit about Enactus US. One of the things that we talked about when we talked in the opening was the vision, mission, and values. The next stage of that really is that value proposition, and what do we do for our audiences and the people that we're in business for. And with Enactus US, it's Enactus USA develops next-gen leaders through experiential learning to be workforce ready by developing real-world business solutions to create a better world. This is really the essence of what we're offering, and it's borne out in different ways for different audiences. For our partners, this shows up in them wanting to hire students that have specific qualities that they know to be important. Our partners will tell us over and over again that Enactus students embody these qualities that are sometimes difficult to find in today's workplace. So those are things that are real. From a student perspective, it's student development. It's giving you opportunities to put into practice some of the things that you're learning in the classroom and have that experiential learning, co-curricular opportunity that can really round out your educational attainment and educational career in meaningful ways, and do so while creating a better world. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, if you will. And so we really try to have this guide us. And one of the key parts to that is student impact. What impact are we having on you by putting these options and opportunities in front of you? And I think one of the things we see in some of the research that we have is that the job skills align, and in particular with the World Economic Forum's the Future Jobs Report. In fact, one of the things I thought was interesting in their latest report, the top 5 skills for 2025. And I'll just read through them. Number 1 was analytical thinking and innovation. Number 2 was active learning. Number 3 was complex problem solving. Number 4 was critical thinking and analysis. And number 5 was creativity, originality, and initiative. I'm pretty sure we've defined what an Enactus student is with those 5 capacities. And those are the skills for 2025 that the World Economic Forum sees as the most important to be successful in that time frame. So we're really working through to do that. We benchmark against the Gallup Purdue data, and Enactus students outperform other students quite a bit in that particular one as well. The skills that we also survey you. So the skills most used by Enactus students: teamwork, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, and communication. If you get on now and if we get on now and you'd like to see just to Google and look up the top 5 qualities that employers look for the most, these are going to show up in most of those surveys and things. So you can see some of the things from an Enactus student perspective that you're learning and that are taking place. Next, just to give you an idea of the demographics, because you are part of a larger unit, and you obviously have your own team you deal with, but you're part of around 7,800 students in the US, 370 plus campuses, and impacting a lot of people, close to 400,000 people. Very racially diverse mix of students in this, more female than male. That's mirrors the college-going population as well. And you can see as well some of the top majors that are there. And this one is the impact, more that social impact. What's happening relative to the work that's being done. And interestingly enough, over 37% of the projects in the US are in 2 of the SDGs. Decent work and economic growth, number 8, and number 4, quality education. So really rounding out the things that are important and tend to be show more passion, if you will, for our student or with our students in particular. And last but certainly not least, just wanted to share some of our partners who are with us for the very same reasons that we've already outlined. They see you as that next gen of leaders that can really take not only their organizations, but other organizations to the next level and realize their missions and visions, and have bought into this and bought into you as students. So there's just kind of a plethora of types of organizations that are committed in some way, have incredible corporate social responsibility and social impact in mind when they move forward, and realize that entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial attitude, it aligns with those top 5 skills we talked about of critical thinking and creativity and problem solving and active learning and all of those. And so with that, I'm going to toss it to Robyn. And I think she may have a different approach that she'd like to take for these last 5 to 10 minutes. I'm not sure, but I will throw it over to you and take your lead on this.
Sure. So as Steve alluded to, Enactus USA is part of this robust and incredible global network that you also heard me talk about at the beginning. So I wanted to give a few minutes to talk about what we do at Enactus Global, and then want to hear a little bit more from you all around questions, and perhaps Sierra can help me out on that. So Enactus Global, again, you are part of something so much larger than what you might see on your own campus. You're part of a network of 35 countries that works with 72,000 students across nearly 1,800 campuses and impacts 1.3 million people. That is an incredible community of practice for you, of colleagues, of leaders that if you connect to now, they're going to be with you throughout your entire career. So I think that is the power of being part of Enactus. We are, as Steve talked about, the impact that's happening in the US, think about how we multiply that across 35 countries. So we are really having a global impact across multiple dimensions, people, and all of the access to the things that make life worth living, our planet, really thinking about climate change, thinking about sustainability, and then prosperity. How do we make sure that we have economic vitality, economic inclusion, and that people are able to build lives of meaning and success for themselves? So the work that Enactus students and teams are doing really hit all 3 of these things. You can also see here that that the work, that the projects that you all are doing and that you bring to competition really have a real impact. This just shows you a little bit of the impact of happening through the World Water Race, one of our global competitions. We run both global competitions and national competitions. And so some of the global competitions relate to specific sustainable development goals. And you can see here just the scale of outcomes that have truly been achieved from 2017 to 2019.
You know, interestingly enough, Robyn, the next phase of the water race turned into One Race for Oceans, which is going on right now, which we just found out about a week or 2 ago that there'll be a challenge specifically for Enactus US students.
That's
in the
right.
One Race for Oceans challenge. There'll be more on that tomorrow in our final session, final kickoff session over the lunch hour tomorrow. So hopefully you can join, and we'll tell you more about the One Race for Oceans challenge. If you can't make it, keep an eye out between email and social. We'll be announcing that over the course of the next week or so.
That's great. Well, and then to close us out, Sierra, do you want to come off mute and help me with this final piece?
Yeah, thank you, Robyn. So one of
great.
the things we're seeing as we go through this week is we're getting to see into everybody's personal lives, right? We're Zooming, we're spending time. So Emily Derby, I'm going to throw you a little question here. So last night during our Zoom game night where you joined in, we got to meet your pup, and I would love to go around the room and chat and see, let's hear about your pet. So Emily, I'm going to ask you to kick it off.
Okay, yes, you got to meet Bosco last night. He just happened to want to go outside right as I started the Zoom. Yeah, Bosco's a old man, but has a young soul still. So he's a Wheaton Terrier. He's fluffy. He's really funny. He's quick. I take him on a lot of walks, and he makes my day. So that's Bosco.
And Steve, I recall you have a couple pets at home.
Oh yes, I have 2 boxers. They are an old boxer man and an old boxer lady. They're both over 10 years old. We've been very fortunate that they're both around at 10 years old. They are, if you've ever been around a boxer, they are the goofiest dogs you'll ever meet. They have so much personality, and they keep us on our toes. All right, so then do I get to ask a question then?
Absolutely.
Actually, I want to hear from Adriana and have her tell us what she's doing because I think it's fascinating. What are you doing right now?
Hi, for those who don't know me, my name is Adriana. And I'm doing an exchange program in Ireland. If nobody was on the call yesterday, I kind of introduced myself a little bit. I am originally from the Enactus University of Missouri, Kansas City team. And I'm doing a year abroad in 2 different programs. Right now, I'm in the city of Cork, Cork City, Ireland. I'm spending a semester here. And I actually attended the first Enactus meeting with their team this week, which I was really excited about. And I get to learn more about their projects and kind of lead. They're really excited to have me there. Yeah, and then so next semester, I'm also doing another program in South Korea. And the school there also has an Enactus team, which is really exciting. So yeah, I mean, if you guys have any questions, let me know or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm excited to get to know everybody.
I love that, Adriana. I feel like you need to, blog about it or, talk about your experiences along the way so we can learn around how to support even more cross-cultural exchange among Enactus students.
Yes, I'll definitely drop my Instagram where I've kind of been posting about my
Sweet.
trips.
Okay, great.
I'm doing a takeover for my school study abroad office during the week of November 9th through 16th. So I'll definitely share those with the Enactus USA Instagram, ask you guys to share it.
Great.
Sounds great. Thank you, Adriana. And I know we have some cat lovers in the room. Hannah, Chloe, could you give us the rundown?
Funny, I'm in the office today. We have a very cool poster here, but my cat's actually just taking a little nap down here. Having a tired day, I let him in the storage closet. So for the 2 who've been in the office, but we have 2 floors, lots of boxes. He loved running around playing, and normally I don't let him in there, but I was keeping an eye on him today as I was getting some shirts out. But Hannah, let's go ahead and pass it over to you.
I always like to joke that my house is at capacity. I have 3 cats living with me right now. And then my mom stole my other cat that I got right out of college because she fell in love with him and would not let me take him when I moved into my own apartment. So I have 3 cats right now, Daphne, Eleanor, and Phoebe. They are all very spicy, but right now it is their cat nap time at 1:52 p.m. So they are lounged out on the bed, like laying in the sun all together and just napping away. But they usually, most of the time in a meeting you're talking to me, there is probably a cat on my lap. They love to hang out with me. They are so clingy, but cats usually are.
And our new CEO, Robyn, I believe, has a new pet child in the house. Do you share?
I do. So in addition to the 2 humans that I helped keep alive, or 3 if you count my husband, we were one, you've probably heard about the mass adoption of pandemic puppies and pandemic cats too, kitties. So yes, we also have a pandemic puppy. We have a 7-month-old golden doodle named Scout, who is also taking a nap right now. But she is incredibly fun and a lot of work. Puppies are a lot of work. So she's super fun. She's been a fun addition to our family. She's the first dog that we've had in our family. I grew up with dogs, but I haven't had one as an adult. And so it took a while to convince my husband that it was time for us to take care of something else, and that was not going to be a baby. That it's a puppy is adding a lot of joy to our lives.
That's awesome. Thank you, Robyn. And
Yeah.
Tiffany and Becky, share with us.
Yeah, I have 4 dogs in the house. One 10-year-old Basset Hound that's very overweight. I think he's about 85, 90 pounds, so he should not be that big, but he does move around pretty good. I have 2 14-year-old Peekapom, so Pomeranian/Pekingese. They do get around. They both have totally different personalities. And then I have a 5-year-old hound. We think she looks like a Vizsla hound, but she's just as lazy as the 10 and 14-year-olds. So busy dog family.
I'll go, and sorry I'm off camera. I'm having some connectivity issues, so you guys keep freezing, but I might be the only soulless person on here that does not have a pet, but I want to get a puppy. But Robyn, I know lots of people that got pandemic puppies that are making me pause a little bit.
You got to be ready. You got to be fully ready.
know.
Do not rush into this. Do not rush into this.
I
Yes.
know, but I do have my childhood dog is still alive. He is an evil Chihuahua. He's 17 years old. And his name is Pierre, and he only likes my mom and me. So I do have him as a special place in my heart.
Love that. Thank you all so much for sharing. It's great to get, insight into your homes. And as if you've met me, you obviously know I love cows, but living in the Bay Area of California, I don't own any cows here. So no pets for me here at home either at this time, but someday soon I will be the person.
You didn't rent a place that was cow friendly?
I'm working on that, Steve. I'm working on it. I did see, we did have an interesting article in the news that said they're teaching cows to be potty trained. So it may not be so far off after all. Well, thank you all so much for sharing a little bit of insight into your life. And Robyn, I'll let you pose a question as we close up.
Sure. So I would say just as a closing question that I'd love to just hear from folks, and you can either put it in the chat or say it out loud, just like one word. When you think of Enactus, what's the one word that comes to mind for you? So when you think of Enactus, what's the one word that comes to mind? Give yourself a second to put it in the chat. Passion from Steve. Thank you, Steve. What else we got? Community. Future. Yeah, I like that one. Driven. Yes. Impact. Anything else? Yeah, all of those things. I think you all are certainly a community of passionate, driven, future-oriented impact leaders. So can't wait to cheer you on and to really support the work that you're doing and the work that the full Enactus USA community is doing. So thanks so much for joining us today and for letting me be a part of your kickoff week. Looking forward to seeing all the impact that you have in the year to come.